Order of the Powhatan County Board of Supervisors workshop meeting for March the 22nd, 2022. Mr. McClung, you can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Carmack, you do the invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, bless us for another beautiful day in Powhatan and guide us today as we seek to do the people's business. Amen.
Amen. Request to postpone agenda items, additions, deletions, changes in the order of presentation. Not hearing any, you get a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So open up the first public comment period. Anyone seeking to speak? It's 3 minutes as an individual and up to 5 minutes as a group, representing a group. Floor is open. Not seeing anyone here. Anyone on Zoom, Mr. Smith?
Zoom has activity, but nobody's raised their hand, Mr. Chair.
All right, great. Diving right into that. To the new business, let's start with discussion on the welcome signage, Winterfield Road. Mr. Chardon?
Yeah, so this is something the EDA, Economic Development Authority, has been talking about and working on for a little while now. As part of the kind of branding the county and emphasizing our style and quality of aesthetics. One thing we looked at was signage in the county. We've upgraded some of the signage in the village area. So we looked at our borders and entrances to the county to see what we had. We actually found a couple locations, I think, between us and Amelia, that didn't even have the little VDOT signs. We had those put up by VDOT. But one area we particularly looked at was around the Route 711 Winterfield area. I regularly hear people refer to that as Chesterfield, Midlothian. Anytime something happens over there and there's some good press release or a good story in Richmond business or whatever, it almost always comes out to Midlothian area business or Chesterfield area business, and I'm going to go back, get that corrected. Just the other week had somebody that I would think would know that. They've been here a long time, very involved. I'm embarrassed to say who it was. Nobody here today. They were talking about how it'd be nice if Powhatan had some development like Chesterfield has at Winterfield Place with wild dinner and all that. That's Powhatan. So if you hear that again and again, and as much as we want to differentiate ourselves and say we have a different style of living, a different pace, a different aesthetic, all that different quality and standards, I think it's important for people to know when you are and when you aren't in Powhatan. So that's what the EDA has been discussing for a while now. So they've come up with this sign design here that's kind of similar to what you have in Scottville throughout the village. That would go in the median right there to just better establish that you're entering Powhatan as a part of Powhatan County. Talked to work with VDOT, so they're okay with the location and design meets all their requirements. We have some unused marketing funds in our economic development budget that we propose to use for this. If not, the EDA had talked about using some of their funds, but right now we propose to use the economic development marketing funds for this. We got 3 quotes, and this one would be the low quote on it. So it'll be formal board approval, but we don't want to set up signage or anything, of this importance of representing the county without, you all being okay with it. So again, no real formal action needed. Just want to make sure y'all are okay with that. And if so, we'll go ahead with it.
Any comments? Board members?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Chardon, this is a tracking sign. Very unattractive price. In a budget season where we've got inflation running to the 4-year high, where we're not even talking about giving money back to the taxpayers, I can't support this at all. I'm sorry. I don't see. It's nice to be in Powhatan County and nice to know the exact spot. I don't see major value addition. People run their GPS anyway. So I'm sorry.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Williams.
Red says truck. People do go down there, and they don't know that that's Powhatan. When we held the Richmond Regional Transportation Forum here recently, I can't tell you the number of people that didn't know that Fountain's Bridge. And it does the Independence Golf Center, for example, which is part of the development, was Powhatan County. So I think the sign makes a lot of sense. It's a very attractive sign also, in keeping with the development that we have down there. The only issue I have is the cost, of which we could have gotten cheaper cost. But that's it.
And I don't disagree on the price. We talked to multiple people, got multiple quotes. I don't expect we'll be able to find one cheaper again with cost rising. So.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Comment.
I would be happy to support the EDA on this. This is money's coming out of their budget or the economic development
Yes.
budget that you had set aside, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, yeah, I will be happy to support this.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I agree with Mr. Williams. You know, there's a lot of confusion down in that area. I get a lot of, I mean, people really don't know where the line is right there. So I agree with David.
I would echo the sentiment of Mr. Williams also. And frankly, if it was $8,000, we'd be saying it's too much. So that's where that comes from. It is unquestionably a nice area of Powhatan County. There's a lot of development there. People don't know, they don't recognize. We have that little green sign that comes up from VDOT of the state. And this is a much better looking sign. I can remember 2 years ago, when we were fortunate enough to have Mr. Peterson come visit us and guide us in our mission statement and vision and so forth. And that was one of the things that he brought up. You know, when you come into Powhatan County, you only have one chance for a first impression. And that sign is your first impression. We talked, even that time, we talked about our monument that's out on Route 60 coming into the county. So you get my support on this sign without any doubt. And I appreciate the time and effort and going through the process of trying to find multiple prices that would be as low as possible to get a good product. I like it. Now we're going to get into number 8, old business, the budget discussion.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Welcome this afternoon. I thought that as far as flow of the discussion, it might be helpful if we went after the CIP discussion early and spent some time talking about that. And then we have some information on miscellaneous contributions. And then after that, just other discussion on the operating budget in general. And to finish out, if that works, we'll start with that. Hopefully we can answer any questions along the way. Staff is ready to go. I hope with, we talked about any questions you may have on CIP, but in general, CIP from this year to last year, and Mr. McClung, you're a little disadvantaged because you might not have seen firsthand the CIP last year. There's not a lot of changes from what the 10-year vision looked like in this year's budget from what we looked at last year. A couple of those things we mentioned last meeting was Lucas CPR device in fiscal year 28, $200,000 for that for public safety, and heart monitor replacement, $400,000 in fiscal year 28 also. So these are 5 years out, but we did add that to the CIP that you guys were familiar with last year in their request. In addition, in fiscal year 32, we had 2 public works projects added to the CIP. I have noticed a warehouse expansion project, $750,000 in fiscal year 32, and a convenience center paving project, $75,000 in fiscal year 32. That's the old convenience center. So, and if you have any questions about the warehouse expansion, the $750,000 is Mrs. Carter, Ramona Carter is with us, I think, today, maybe by Zoom. She's now Ramona Wilson. I can congratulate her on her name change as of this weekend. So, Ramona, if you give us a heads up on the warehouse expansion project, it'd be helpful.
What page is that on?
Hey, thanks, Mr. Smither. The warehouse, currently right now, we share that with the sheriff's department. So they have half of it is secured. And then we have the other half where we store like snow plows and miscellaneous materials and equipment that we use during operation. So this would just expand onto our half of it to give us more storage for, because we're really out of space right now. And there's also a lot of like furniture, spare furniture and stuff from when we do office relocations and things like that. We store all that out there. And it's full right now, and we have a hard time for our guys getting materials in and out when they need it. They have to rearrange everything.
Any questions on that project? I asked Ms. Wilson for that help because it is a decent size budget number, $750,000. It is out there 10 years from now, but it's new to your group of projects this year.
10 years.
Good question. I think, good question. But Ms. Wilson, what do you think about the reason we have it out there in year 10? Is that when you don't see the need earlier than that possibly, or?
Yeah, and we're also anticipating at that point there being the next phase of the park, of Fighting Creek Park. So we would end up storing groundskeeping equipment and things out there as well at that point.
Other projects, we talked about a little bit of that with joint with the school board in place. So there's 3 projects that we recommended for you to include, but we recommended to include using the school maintenance reserve, $799,000 we talked about the other night. That was the projects for the new radio system for the school buses. This is the way.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr.
I'd
Wilson.
like to go back to the convenience center page. If we could.
Okay.
That will be page 18 of the CIP.
The other day, and I actually got constituent calls about the need for that parking lot to be repaired and paved over. It's a minefield right now to go through that. Is there any way we can expedite something to get that thing paved sooner?
We sure can. We sure can. In fact, we should have contractors on board with the other convenience centers, maybe at the same time frame. We get the $75,000 in 2032 dollars. So Ms. Wilson, I guess we could expect a better number now possibly.
Yeah, I would be all for moving it up because we have been band-aiding that for a very long time. Like Mr. Williams said, it's in bad condition and we get a lot of complaints on it. So if we could move it up, then we wouldn't have to spend so much money fixing it.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, sir.
Is it, for these projects and for public utilities, can we use American Rescue Funds for this?
Water projects, the way I understand it.
Just water projects?
Water projects.
No,
Is that right?
no, there are 4 different categories.
Yeah, but on utility, I thought we were focused totally on water for public utilities, but do you think there's 4 categories within public utilities?
No, not only the.
Okay, yes.
But I don't think we can use it for maintenance, but there's a whole nother, let's finish this. And
Okay.
come back, 'cause
I'm going to go back to Mr. Williams' question on the paving, and I think we should move it up also. But I don't want to wait for the Eastern Convenience Center. I'd like to get it done when we pave the parking lot in the village. Because I get the same phone calls, and in addition to the ones that the recycling bins are overflowing every weekend. And at that time, I don't know who's got that job, but we've been waiting on it, and we approved it, and it's been approved, and that's when we should get it done, I would think.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
we've got signs at the convenience center that paving was donated to us. Is that correct?
I'll defer to Ms. Wilson on that. I didn't realize that.
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
Question was any paving donated to the county for at the existing convenience center? Looks like there's some signs out there to mention that.
maybe when it was first put into place, but not recently.
Signs are still there, can we ask? I mean,
We'll
take 'em down. We'll take 'em down.
I didn't know there was a
I
sign.
never saw that. It's his best.
Okay.
I wondered where he was going with that. Now I get it.
No, we can accommodate the earlier paving. On the school construction, we did talk the other night about using some of the school maintenance reserve fund, a little over half of what they have left, $799,000, towards 3 projects: the radio system within the buses, some extra preschool classrooms at PLC in the back, and also the HVAC replacements at Powhatan Elementary School. Those totals were estimated $799,000, and that concept we have never talked about before, where you direct CIP projects towards the maintenance reserve. We've typically been waiting for the school board to ask us for those uses, so that's a little bit of change in strategy.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Williams.
and I asked the same question. Can we use ESSER funds that they've received? Can they use any of that money that they've received for these projects?
I think currently the ESSER funds, that the way they got their money is they had to apply. They had to fill out an application of what they were going to use the funds for. So I think what I gathered from the joint meeting was they would have to change their plan on any funds that they can redirect from if they're not doing as much of the COVID cleaning or needing the extra staff or whatever. I'd have to read up to whether that would be an acceptable use for it. And then the state would have to approve that for theirs, because theirs goes to the Department of Education. It's a pass-through.
Well, we can get you that answer.
We can
We'll do
ask.
some research for you, get you an update for you at your budget. Vote.
And Mr. Smither, on that same topic, as Mr. Williams brings up ESSER, I know that the state's having a little bit of a problem with their budget down there in their grant, but if they get the $2 million, if the school gets the $2 million of construction money from the state, are they able to use any of that
I
money?
think so, with the exception of the radio system. I'm not sure
Right.
that would qualify, but the elementary school with HVAC and the classroom, the PLC, I think would qualify.
Is there any potential for grant money when it comes to these radios?
My expert in radios.
Tom, have you heard of any grant money out there? They had grant one time for radios.
Yeah, like 2 years ago,
Yes, sir, they did.
$50,000.
Yes.
Why didn't we use it?
They were, well, it wasn't from us.
Okay. Good answer. So they had 50,000 2 years ago.
That's correct. I called them on it quite often.
You did, and I know you did.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, if they get 2 million from the state, that's something that should be a conversation with us down the road here. If we ever hear from the state, we need to keep that on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of things that have popped back up on the CIP that the archery range, I did not recommend that last year. We do have it out there in the final year this year, a $30,000 budget. I'm not sure if there's a what page that's on, but
That'll be on the,
I think we've got $10,000 grant for that too.
that's on page 27 of the proposed CIP.
And the archery range did get some warm and fuzzy feelings from the advisory study that was done for Parks and Rec, and there was some demand for the archery. So the question, I guess, for the board would be, if you want to move forward that project any quicker than 2032. That is an additional project you did not see last year on CIP,
The archery range.
the archery.
Then we're in the Parks and Rec, $30,000. We've got this year, actually it was, well, this still this year, the batting cages you have a little baseball history, Mr. Smith? Batting cages, two batting cages for $30,000 that were supposed to be, from my knowledge that I've gathered, installed at the Powhatan Landmark Center at that baseball diamond there.
I did talk with Ms. Wilson and Mr. Piper about that. I think what the plan is, Mr. Chairman, was one at the Landmark Center and two at the Fighting Creek for 30,000.
So do we have three of
I
them?
think Mark is thinking we can get three up for 30,000, one of them at the Landmark Center, two at the Fighting Creek.
Okay. A lot more baseball gets played at Fighting
Yeah,
Creek.
is that the, your
And
understanding,
softball.
I don't know if Mark is on the line or Ms. Wilson, but I think that was my conversation from last week with Ramona.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. I'm not sure if Mark is on here, if that has changed at all, but that was my understanding, is one at Pocahontas Landmark Center and then two at Fighting Creek.
And they were coming in, one of them was coming in that right now.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. No, I'm not thinking.
Back to the archery ring, 32 is when the Parks and Rec folks recommended, is that
I
correct?
don't know if they put a date on it. It was a high priority, but they didn't have it. What a day. I'm not sure how we got to 32 in one area.
It may have been added, Ramona can speak to that. It may have been added for 32 or we decided to move it to 32.
Yeah, we added it back in from 32 because it wasn't funded before. And with that, getting that land at the Pocahontas Landmark Center, that gave us a good area to, and so we weren't having to purchase the land. It was just really the materials and equipment. And we talked with Goochland County about a grant that they obtained to put theirs in place. So that's why it came in 32 was because we were just we didn't want to add it in the middle of the CIP. It was just a new project. We considered it a new project.
So is there appetite for the board, A, for an archery range in particular, and B, to accelerate that time?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Carmen.
I think right now I would keep that on at 32 as a placeholder. We have in next year, I think, or 2 years, 6.5 million, where we're kind of doing a major overhaul for Parks and Rec. I think let's take a look at it then to try to arbitrarily put a date on when we should do it. It's kind of for on.
I would agree with Ms. Carmack on that. Let's look at it holistically rather than.
Mr. Williams, it was a tie, by the way.
Well, we know who the Tides coaching now.
We try to alternate. Remember that one.
Next possession, right?
Exactly.
This is a question for Ramona. Ramona, I remember the study and I remember that being discussed that night. What kind of range was it going to be? Was it an archery range or was it going to be a firing range, you know, with weapons?
It was actually an archery range, but at that time, we were looking at an indoor facility because there was a local business that was willing to contribute to it, a substantial amount of money, and they ended up contributing to the Goochland one because they had a daughter that was very active and is, I think, the national or state champion for archery. So that's why it was a much bigger project to start with.
Okay, thanks.
If we transition on the what's changed list, I've kind of misled you accidentally last couple of meetings on the sheriff's vehicles. I described the sheriff going from 5 vehicles per year to 6 vehicles per year. The adjustments I was seeing was inflation adjustments on 5 vehicles per year. So the plan is still 5 vehicles per year replacing for the sheriff's office, with an exception of fiscal year 23, which has 7 vehicles. So we go 7 and 23 and 5 throughout. But the dollar amounts adjusted, I mentioned to you the increases. Was not a 6th vehicle, it was the 5th vehicle. This is a higher cost. And the school land purchase is a new item we talked about last week. We were $2.5 million. We've got it in 2028 as a placeholder for utilizing debt to purchase the land, but it, for whatever new site the school board might need in the future, but they've got that in 2028. So that's, the things that we didn't fund that the school board requested. School divisions support fleet. They had a series of, I guess not central office, but school division support fleet spread over 10 years was $1,989,000. So we did not add that item into your request. We're showing you as a recommended. And it has asphalt improvements at $208,000 spread over 10 years. So that was items that we thought probably could be handled in the general operating budget on an annual basis. We did not include that in the CIP that you're seeing today. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Carter.
if that's, if we want to add something to the CIP, is now an appropriate time to bring that up for
it would be a great
discussion?
time to before we transition to operating.
Okay, I would like to bring up the idea of having a senior center put in our CIP.
Any program, anything as far as just, as far as the initial design or anything as far as program that you think might be, or we just want to get to the design level? What would make
Kind of the
sense?
design level,
Okay.
and I don't even know if we could even incorporate that perhaps in with the Parks and Rec expansion in a couple of years. I believe it was like 6.5 million or something like that. And it seems like that 6.5 million is a rather nebulous number right now as to exactly what that's going towards. It seems like a lot of it was the Fighting Creek Park expansion, but perhaps we can look at doing a design. I mean, I don't think it needs to be anything big. It doesn't need to be the Taj Mahal of, senior centers, but I think something, I've heard, and I know other members of the board have definitely heard that this is a desire from many members in our community.
Oh,
That,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Cox.
before we start running down the road, building something and designing something, I'd like to see us actually sit down and talk about the need for a senior center, why it's there, what it has to accomplish, and why we would even consider it.
fair enough.
Based on that, that will lead us someplace. It might have to do with the size of it. It might have to do with a lot of different things, but I think we need to have a serious discussion about this before we decide it's something that's really needed in the county.
And so if any year that you decide, let's say the discussions go forward, like you just mentioned, and we decide to place it in fiscal year 24 or decide not to place it at all. Fiscal, we have two topics, a 10-year vision and then the 1-year vision. So I don't think it sounds like it'll make it in, maybe it will if the discussions happen early enough for it to make it in the 23 discussion. If it doesn't, it could easily be.
We can always amend the budget.
That's right. Whenever we get discussions.
We could put it on an agenda sometime in the future.
Yeah.
To have a discussion about it.
And we can do some research as far as what facilities are out there design wise.
Correct, they vary all over,
Yeah.
yeah, depending on the
And then we have
size.
to have somewhere to put it, if the board wants to go down that path.
Right. One other change that we made recently, if you remember, when the county borrowed money, I guess last time we borrowed a big issue was 2016. Y'all were smart enough to create a use, any unspent funds could be used for capital improvement projects. And how you define capital improvement projects? The way the bond council wrote it up was projects that are in your capital improvement plan. So as we stumbled into savings on our construction costs from the 2016 bonds, for example, our ERP system, we borrowed $1.5 million. We're going to come in, we could be in the $900,000 range. So we have some savings on that. We have some savings in a couple of places. For us to reallocate those funds and use the proceeds from debt, we have to have it in CIP. So I'd like to put a placeholder out there for $1 million for an industrial park or commercial park property acquisition type of project.
You just borrowed 850,000, you just bought 850,000.
I did. And, be a great project. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, but the question is, if the board ever wanted to go in the direction of buying another piece of property, and you decide that you want to use the unspent bond proceeds for that acquisition, this will give you a key, at least have that opportunity. Doesn't mean you need to, you're gonna do it, but if you ever decided that you were gonna do it, it has to be in the CIP. So that, so we do have a amendment in there for $1 million placeholder in our CIP that will be funded by, if used, it will be funded by unspent bond proceeds.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Smithers, you like to spend money. There's no question about that. Rather than creating a fund for something we might spend more money on, why don't we use it to pay down the $1.6 million that we have for our fire station? That's okay. That's the place it should go. That's all pay-go money. Okay. Why should we create another way to spend money for something that may or may not have value when we have out of pay-go $1.6 million this year? I'd like to see that money spent on that. That's money we don't have to spend.
That's certainly an option, Mr. Cox. It really is. The problem, what we're trying to address is if the board wants to make some plays in the economic development area and develop certain sites commercially, this will give you an option to go that direction.
Mr. Smith, we've had no discussions on that at all.
Right, and you won't be able to have one if you don't have this option in your toolbox. So
That's okay. We don't have to do that right away. We don't have to create it. If you know what the savings are.
yeah, you can put it off another year.
Okay.
Yeah, if you put it off another year, then they say you wouldn't have it 2 months for another year.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
We're spending too much money as it is.
But I think that's my summary of the CIP highlights, not highlights, but changes from what you guys got familiar with last year as a board as part of our 10-year plan.
Before we move on,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr.
a
Cox.
couple things. In your funding sources on page 3, why aren't we listing American Rescue Plan funds?
Page 3 of what are you in the CIP still?
Kind of looks like.
Above your budget book.
Yeah, but that's like 8
Oh, I'm
sections.
sorry, tab 3.
Yeah, okay, still in the
proposed,
In the grants line, grants property.
But it's a separate, I understand, okay, it's hidden in there, but it's a separate one. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because the question would be on page 31. Okay. This is Fighting Greek wastewater treatment plant upgrades, $700,000 for 2024. Why don't we move the $700,000 into 2023 and use the funds suspended? We got the funds.
I mean, what page are you on?
He's on 31.
31.
In section 3.
3,
Yeah.
page 3, 30.
This is wastewater treatment, which we have planned for 2024. We have the money in the fund. Why don't we go ahead and spend it?
We need, so we do, we do need to figure out a strategy for that money. We got $3,024,000 obligated right now, so, and 300 for water.
Right.
So we still
That
have 2,000,003.
That leaves $2,004,000.
Right.
Okay, but we're not discussing that, and that is precisely what that money's for, right?
It very well could be for that project.
Okay, so why wouldn't we spend it for that project? Now, let me go to the next one. If we would look at the $1,500,000, $1,600,000 on page 5 for fire station number 1. Now, as I understand it from the information you provided us with, Mr. Smith, under the general services provision of the act, you include pay-go funding building of infrastructure. Okay. That's what this fire station is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could use, we have 2 million, which is not even earmarked. We could use $1.6 million. Okay, and pay it with American Rescue Plan funds rather than money out of the general fund. And we could also use the 700,000, that takes care of the 2.4 million. That's money we don't have to spend out of the general fund.
That's very true.
Okay.
Very true.
So why aren't we doing that?
We hadn't had discussion on that. That's certainly an alternative. We look at.
Well, I mean, here we are with the CIP, and we haven't even started those discussions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Carmack.
I think at the end of the day, these are both pay-go projects, correct?
These are both paid by the $1.6 million for the fire
Okay,
station.
so-
Yes.
You have the American Rescue Act money or the money in the general fund. Does it matter?
Yes,
Why?
because the American Rescue Fund is restricted in terms of what you can use it in. Pay-go money is whatever the five of us decide to spend it on. Therein lies the difference.
Yeah.
So you have to target it toward things that you can use it for.
Now, the one thing that I've gathered from the American Rescue Act, and I could be wrong on this, it's gotten a lot more liberal in the usage of that. I mean, from what I gather, you can funnel that, a lot of it into your general fund and then use it from there. So my point being is, for instance, Chesterfield County used their American Rescue Act funds for Parks and Rec improvement. That wasn't, so
Yeah. It is more liberal than it was on.
it's
on the
more
original.
liberal than the CARES Act
CARES
was
Act,
originally.
yes.
That's what I'm saying. They're both pay as you go. You have the money in the bank. I don't think it's the criticality of what account you draw it out of is, I think up for debate.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes,
sorry. are you-
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Go ahead, Mr. Cox.
The difference is a question where somebody comes up with a project and says, wow, I want to use the American Rescue Funds, and guess what? That doesn't cost the taxpayers anything. Okay, versus taking it out of the general fund, which does cost, which is pay-go, which does cost the taxpayer. So there's some little nuances being played with this. Okay, the intent of this thing, one of them is certainly water and infrastructure there. $700,000 is a perfect example. If I'm correct about pay-go funding the buildings, so is our fire station. So why are we hesitant to use it? Why are we trying to save this money? And what are we trying to save it for?
We don't know. I tell you what, I'm more strange. I say we don't know because right now we just have allocated $3,024,000 for broadband, and we're pretty comfortable that's gonna take care of our needs. So, but I'd like to know that for sure.
That's not what we have in the CIP. It's a little over 2 million, right?
Well, we had 500, now we got the other 2.5 million. So if you combine the 2 years, you've got your 3 million.
But you've got the 3 million coming out of the American Rescue
Yes.
Fund, but we already had 500 already set aside.
Out of American
Okay.
Rescue.
Okay, and so it's not 3 million coming out of that.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so now it's 3 million plus 500.
No, it's 500 plus 2.5 million. So we got a total of 3 million coming out of rescue. The question is, do we need the extra 2.3 million for any project down the road, whether it's broadband related or surprises? If we got $30 million of pay as you go project in the next 10 years, and you're so right, we can sub in the $2 million for CARES Act for any of the $30 million. It's up to you guys as a strategy. Right now, which, we don't know, we've got a couple of years to go and spend that CARES Act money. And we've got a couple of questions unanswered. What's going to happen next 2 years?
Well, we have a lot of questions of what's going to happen in the next few
Yeah.
years, okay? With the level of inflation coming on, and the answer to inflation is recession.
So how do we react to the surprise? Right now, our reaction over the next 6 months is what projects is the board of supervisors going to say, we need to take care of that 2.3 million? We haven't had those discussions yet. We did last year in the budget, we adopted $1.6 million out of pay-go money for the fire station. We had that discussion. We beat that to death last year. And so now we could go back. It doesn't have to be the fire station. We have $6 million in funding in the general fund for 23. That's pay as you go. And you can substitute anything you want for that. So,
And the answer is moving the money out of a restricted fund, okay? Spend the money that's in a restricted fund, which is what the American Rescue Plan Fund is, okay? And then shepherding all of our other funds in pay-go so that we can use them any way we want to. That gives us much more flexibility as you go forward, as things change. So rather than trying to protect that as a little pot of money that we might want to spend, we still have the money. It's a question of where it's coming out of. I would prefer that we go ahead and take the money out of restricted funds where we have ample opportunities, things we've already decided we're going to fund. That then gives us the opportunity with general funds to spend it based on how we want it to react. It gives us more flexibility, not less.
That is definitely a strategy. I can't deny that it's a strategy. Water needs, the county has water needs, and that's allowed we use for this money too. We haven't had a chance to go over, are there water ways for us to tackle water issues in the county and use that same money? We just haven't had the good discussions that I'd like to have on the American Rescue Fund at this point.
So that's another one we're going to have. Do you want to have them? Why don't we have them? I mean, it's part of the budget.
We need to. Doesn't have to be part of the budget.
I'm finished, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Cox. Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mr. Williams.
I've listened to the discussion very close. And man, I'm finding myself agreeing with Mr. Cox's response to Mrs. Carmack's question, what difference does it make? Because you got two pots of money. And as Mr. Cox said, one has fences around it, which limits the use, and the other one is up to us. What's wrong with going forward with what Mr. Cox is saying and going ahead and using the targeted funds that have fences around them right now for these two projects? And then if we have water projects coming up, discussions, I think I know where you're going. We could use that other money that we've got right now, pay-go money towards that, couldn't we?
We could.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find, what is your thoughts in terms of recommendations responding to Mr. Cox? When he says, let's go ahead and use the restricted funds and free up the money that we have for pay-go such that we could have broader flexibility and have to use those monies.
Mr. Williams, it works. You can do it that way too. It's the only thing that we've got a plan in place that you guys put in place last year for the fire station, and we can modify that plan. There's no magic to the strategy that Mr. Cox is describing that works. It's you see it often with bond projects where pay-go versus debt. You substitute in a project you would have paid debt cash for debt and use the money somewhere else. It happens. It happens all the time. In this case, we have not had discussion as to what the next project is. We have had discussions about the $1.6 million in the fire station. Certainly entertain us some more discussions on that. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Clement.
I would like to see before we make a decision on using the Rescue Act money to fund the fire and rescue and that other water treatment project. I would like to have more discussion on that and the pros and cons of doing each. I think that's
I agree.
okay.
I totally agree.
Good.
I just wanted to get it on the
Yeah.
table.
So that basically wrapped the CRP discussions. That answered the question about that. If we transitioned to miscellaneous contributions last year, we were so busy getting familiar with the new budget process that we didn't really focus at all on the money that the county contributes to 501c3s locally. And so this year we thought it might be a good exercise if we make sure that the board knew what projects were on that list and what contributions we have been making, which ones we've got proposed for this fiscal year. So that we've got a handout for you, Mr. Bogue provided.
It should have yellow on.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
But we did have this discussion last year. We sat here and listened to Mr. Abel Harris.
That was
To go home for
Was that last year?
hour.
Was that last year or 2 years?
It was 2 years ago. So do we
Hey,
have
Tom, I don't know
another?
if I have that one. Can I get a copy of that? Thanks.
It should be some of those.
That's okay. I need help. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm being covered up in paper over here, and I don't know quite what I've got and where it should be going.
Yep.
Okay, so you,
Yes, sir. Right.
and are these pages numbered so I know where to replace them in the book?
You'll just make a document to receive the,
So it's all will be retailed.
the last process.
So everything, just to follow up with you, Tom, everything you've given us goes behind tab eight.
So that'll, not tab 8, it's the tab that says others with tab 6.
Oh, this tab. Okay.
Every additional document.
I just want to make sure I wasn't supposed to be deleting something while I was inserting something.
Yes, yes, sir. It's, everything will be in addition. Holly, if you can share on the screen, the PDF label 3, please.
Thank you. Blow it up a little bit more if you don't mind. Thank you. We thought this would be helpful for you as to see the moving parts. A couple of items highlighted in yellow are for 2 reasons. They have not been paid for fiscal year 22. One, the free clinic just hadn't billed us yet. They could bill us later in the year, and they will bill us. But so that's they have not been paid, but will be paid in fiscal year 22. We have not paid senior connections for $10,000 this year. And we've got them set up for $5,000 next year. We will make sure that the board is still in the same thought process that you were in last year, which was not to pay them.
Well, I'm sorry, you just lost it. We got $10,000 budgeted, but we're not gonna pay it.
Correct.
Why do we have it budgeted?
Well, it was in the budget and then we decided not to pay them. So,
I thought we took it out of the budget. I'm sorry.
yeah,
No, sir.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
yeah.
Sure.
No, sir.
How are we gonna attack this?
There's no easy way to attack it. So I guess, just
Start with the one, the new
the
new ones where we've never had any.
Good call. We do have a new $10,000 request from Habitat for Humanity.
What's the justification?
Mr. Schubert's going to help us with that.
Dim so much I can't read the screen. Fair Association. So they have sent in a request saying that it was their first time allocation for critical repair program. That's what they want to use it for, is to help families, seniors, and those with disabilities on limited income safely in their homes. They want to put the money towards assessing the costs, assessing that come in, coordinating and overseeing repair projects with both volunteers and contracted help. That is for critical care. So they're tracking to do 60 repairs in 22. And so I guess there's expecting that to continue, and would like some assistance from the county.
Okay. I guess we'll summarize these questions for you, then we'll come back maybe and do a yes, no type of follow-up. Let's try it that way. Let's go through the rest of the list, and then The next one on the list was a $5,000 request from the Powhatan Fair Association. We did not recommend funding that. We haven't funded in the past, but it was requested. Third item was,
So let me ask a question. Are we going, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Ridgway.
are we going to discuss the reasons for the contribution?
we just did on the habitat.
Okay, so I mean, are we going to do this for?
We can, if you want, I mean, if you raise your hand, yeah.
Yeah, I think with Nichols, just go through them all, and then we go back and
Right.
have a conversation about
We had ride finders in there. It was a request for 500. We did not recommend that funding because we haven't done that in the past. And we've got discussions we know on transportation going on anyway. As far as other new items, Charlotte, that's the only new items that we're seeing on the list.
Central Virginia Legal Aid.
And Lonesome Dove.
Oh, yeah, we're Lonesome Dove, I'm sorry. Lonesome Dove at $2,000. Their request to us was obviously they're serving a great task for the community, but their original request was some kind of tax abatement, and we can't do that for them. But to get $2,000, if it's a contribution, it would be a roughly amount of their tax payment. That's what they're asking us for. That was the Lonesome Dove. And the Central Virginia Legal Aid, $5,000. We do have that in our recommended budget. I don't have the details on that. Sound like we have, is there a question on Central Virginia? You want to hear more about that?
I'm not, it's new, I just.
Yeah. I think Charles, tell us if you don't mind about that, because
So Central Virginia Legal Aid Society is a community of lawyers which provides free civil legal services to low-income individuals. I'm trying to paraphrase. It's a very long, I can share this letter, but the service area spans Richmond, Petersburg, Hopewell, Criminal Heights, Charlottesville, and 15 counties, including Powhatan. It says in 2021, they served 50 Powhatan residents in 22 cases and provided educational outreach to 210 members of the community.
Was it 50 or 15? I'm sorry, members that they served.
They served 50 Powhatan residents in 22 cases, and then they did educational outreach to 210 members of the community. It does say I mean, I know it's a legal aid, but it also says a substantial portion of people that they serve receiving representation avoid homeless situations, which saves on public dollars and shelters. It's a 2-page letter, but they did say they provided service to 50 residents this past year, or 2021.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
on the Central Virginia Legal Aid, I really would be interested in what Mr. Cox had to think about that, okay? Our Commonwealth Attorney.
in fact, I think he's online. Let's see, Mr. Cox, are you still online? Let's see, let's see if he's still there. He is not. Oh, yes, he is. I'm sorry, he's muted. Mr. Cox, you're muted if you are still online. I'd love to ask you a question.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you. What do you know about the Central Virginia Legal Aid group?
They're requesting $5,000.
My experience with them has been mostly they're involved with landlord-tenant situations. I can't say I have had positive experiences with them, but you know, my experience is limited. It's all in the civil realm. So if you're thinking in the criminal realm, they have nothing to do with that. So our paths don't cross that much. And as I said, I am a landlord, so I have dealt with them in that area. But as far as my expertise on them, I don't have any. So I'm not much help to you.
We sure appreciate your time.
While we get to that. If you hit it on, I need to go back, kind of skip over that. They do say their topics include eviction, foreclosure, bankruptcy, divorce, protective orders for survivors of domestic violence, debtor rights, unemployment benefits, wage garnishment, food stamps, Medicaid or Medicare. So that is what their specials in. I was trying to improve.
You know, I would just say in most of those instances, there are other agencies that provide better services than Central Virginia Legal Aid.
Oh, I believe the Chesterfield County, they just established a public defender program in terms of actually funding it. So there's a whole nother stream of lawyers and alternatives coming in.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yes,
That's all the new ones?
yes, sir.
Mr. Williams?
Fair association. What would be the reason we would make $5,000 donation at this time?
We don't have it recommended right now. And the only reason, in general, when these kind of companies, you typically look for the 501c3s that are serving a portion of our clientele that we would love to serve but can't. It's almost every one of these guys you see on this list are services that if we had a program that would do it, we would do it as local government, whether it's Meals on Wheels, Chesterfield Fire, all these topics have a public purpose flavor to them all the way through. That one is more private purpose. It is a 501c3. So that's why we're basically saying it probably doesn't fit into where a contribution should be made.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
On back to what Mr. Williams said, the Fair Association, out there, the $5,000, we don't know where that $5,000 is going. Right. We don't know where it's going.
The fair itself is the main funding revenue generator that they have. So we don't know how the fund will be used.
So I've got a question about the Fair Association myself. The sheriff just stepped out. Mr. Searfoss, you're here.
I defer to the sheriff.
It'd be a good timing there. It's a good timing there. How many people, I know you don't know the number, how many people attended last year, but was it a pretty heavily attended?
It was a very heavily attended event. Our manpower contribution to that, what we say they need to have or what they request is debated every year. So we may have a different amount of deputies on each year, depending. Last year, we did have a problem with people crossing over Route 60. They were parking on the far side and crossing all 4 lanes after dark, from their vehicles and stuff. So we had a lot of challenges last year. So I feel like moving forward, I have more personnel assigned to the fair in the future to compensate for the crowd.
Right. I guess where I'm going with it is, and I completely agree with the fact that if you give them a check for $5,000, you don't know where that money goes. However, the position that I've had, and I still have, and I had it 2 years ago, is if they have a function or an expense that we pay directly, is that possible? For example, if they have porta-johns there and it's $2,000 for that, and we pay that directly, which the citizens of the county benefit from the fair. I think that's a pretty fair statement. I've been there and attended it, and there's lots of people that are there from Powhatan County. I think last year, I'm not going to say it was an anomaly, at least until last year, I guess, and I don't know what it'll be this year, but it's coming up pretty soon. But for you all, the sheriff's department, are you guys compensated from the fair in any way, shape, form, or you just make agreements with them on what's the right number of coverage? And I know there's some disagreement there too.
Well, in the past, we provided 3 deputies. to attend the event and work. And they have paid private security, I believe, to work as their security there. So two of our deputies are generally doing something with the sheriff's office and the fair. We have our booth up there too. And one's usually patrol right now. There's been some discussion back and forth over the last few years about whether or not they were going to pay for security from us to increase that number. And last year, there was an immense amount of folks that attended that fair. I believe it was the first fair that came out after COVID.
Yeah.
And I'd be guessing at what the crowd's going to be this year, but I would assume it's going to be not as much as last year, but more than previous.
Right.
And we may have traffic concerns again, and they're going to have to make a decision about getting the feet on. Discussing program closure, a lot of things that are done. So,
Right.
So, I'm not sure. I have no idea what the fair association's requesting $5,000, whether it's for additional security with me, or whether it's paying for security from somebody else, or what they plan to use it for. I've had a discussion there. But we would be unable to handle the crowd size we had last year.
Yeah, I was there. It was out of control almost from my watching. People were all over the place.
Yeah, we had.
I half a mile down the road walking up Route 60 at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, we shut the roads down at one point and wouldn't allow any more, wouldn't allow any more cars to be admitted.
Right.
But we can't stop people from walking in
Sure.
if they choose to. That's what a lot of people chose to do.
Right. Well, I mean, my perspective on it is, I'm not saying give them a check for $5,000, but I think the citizens in this county, and quite frankly, the businesses in this county benefit from the traffic flow that's generated by that organization. If it's paying for generators or something, is that a possibility, that something that we could do if they said, here's a bill for XYZ company, Mojohn's or whoever?
I can speak to that actually from my experience.
Please.
You're able to restrict the funding and for miscellaneous contributions, but there are typically pros and cons to doing that. The pro, of course, would be you could decide what the money's spent on, but the con is that most organizations have the ability to just divert funding that they were going to use elsewhere, so that you're technically paying for what you want them to pay.
Right.
But in reality, they have extra funding to use for what they wanted to use in the first place.
Good answer. Perfect. I mean, that certainly gives me a direction of where to go. The ride finders.
Mr. Byron, before we leave
Fair?
the fair,
Yeah, go ahead.
so I'm unclear in terms of what the sheriff is already providing, which means the county's providing.
Right.
Okay, is 3 deputies, is that?
And that was approximately how many hours for the fair, 3 days, 36 hours. 4,000 change. 4,000 is a change.
Okay, so we're already donating,
Right.
okay?
As we would for any group that's going to have an organizational event, I think. Would I be right?
We also do standbys over there for EMS and fire as well. So it's not just the sheriff's office, fire.
Sure,
rescue also.
absolutely. And I think it's called community.
Absolutely.
That's the way I look at it. And it's a big community, and it's a very good community. So I, thank you guys for what you do, without any doubt. Thank you very much.
Mr. Byron?
Yes, sir, Mr. Scott.
For the wine festival pays for sheriff department, okay? They don't get anything donated. So it's not everybody gets something in this community.
Right.
Okay, the Fair Association has kind of carved out their own little bit, okay? So $4,000 there, I don't know what your time spent there. We're already making an
Right.
interesting contribution. I'm sorry.
Yep. And maybe the wine festival should look at how the fair does it.
Well, I'll make one comment there. I generally work with wine festivals, my chief deputy, for salary employees that are rates a little bit higher than the average deputy. So
Right.
there is a contribution there also.
I know that there was a lot of coverage there when I went up through there and watched it. And I think that's, speaks highly of you all and the fire and
They don't do
EMS.
work.
Got it. Ride finders. Have we ever done anything with them before?
That's what I don't think we have.
And at the bottom, you have senior navigator. Why are they only even on this list?
They made it in 2020.
That's the last time they made it. So maybe we should just take them off the list, huh?
They.
We were just showing
didn't-
history.
Yes. They didn't submit a request for this year, for the upcoming year.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Carmack.
I'd like to ask about Reynolds Community College. Can you give me just a brief, what do we get for that?
So there's an operating piece and a capital piece. I do know that. So the total on here is the total of both pieces together. So part of what they talked about in the very beginning of their letter is that they did serve 142 students from the county during 2021 academic year. They didn't give us their 2022. Says the total operating request from all localities is $291,011. Our county share of this request is $11,883. And then there's a capital piece, there's a capital budget. The capital budget piece is $33,156, and their capital contribution request from all the localities for 23 is $811,986. So our portion is $33,156.
All right, when they serve 142 students, don't the students pay to go there? It's not like they get it for free.
Correct. I'm
am
not
I
sure
correct?
how the Reynolds also program works at our high school with the ACA program. I'm not sure if that's commingled in here.
Okay.
And if the school, I gotta get that information, but yes, I would just. Only thing I don't know is this an effort to also keep some of the tuition down for those who participate or who go there? That's a good question for them that we can get the information on.
It's a chunk of money, so I figured it would be, out of all the donations here, that's close to $50,000. Considering.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Williams.
Mr. Carmack's question is a question that the board that came on board in 2012 asked. Because the issue was, are you paying twice? As a taxpayer, if you send your child to J. Sergeant Reynolds, you're paying tuition, and then property taxes are going as the supplement. There are many discussions on that. Presentation that we recently received from the head of J. Sergeant Reynolds the other night showed, how much money was coming back to us in terms of scholarships and things like that. I forget what the numbers were. But back then, we were told that there's been this agreement within the community college system that if you fell under the J. Sergeant Reynolds catchment area, that there would be this assessment. And it was going to be on a percentage basis, and that would be levied, and that was to augment things that they couldn't do, monies that they were getting from the state. That was the explanation we got.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
I think the interesting thing, Mr. Carmack, about this contribution is they're trying to figure out what to do with the Goochland campus. Okay, and rearranging that. And so I think in the next time period, whether that's 12 or 18 months, depending upon what they do with it, we have some real questions to ask in terms of how it benefits. One of the things that I saw them talking about was more training for jobs, if you will, whether it's their automobile program coming back and things like that. If that's the direction they end up in that campus, that could be really beneficial to us. But that's kind of things to come.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. O'Malley.
Feed More, Meals on Wheels. I think we should take a deeper look into that. From what I gather, they have been doing quite as many meal deliveries over the past 2 years, at least according to social services. Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
since I delivered all the people who need meals in Powhatan County last Saturday.
so
Okay,
you did do.
Yes,
I
yes.
thought
All of
that
them?
They didn't do, excuse me, they,
they won by district, okay?
right, but
There was one in, go ahead.
I heard that with the Meals on Wheels, that the program's pretty much obsolete.
Not the people that I walked up to on the porch, okay?
Okay.
What they are changing, okay, this, and they, because of COVID, they restricted it to 1 day a week, okay? Starting in April, it's going back to 5 days a week. So now why that makes sense, I don't know, okay? I had one gentleman that was in Holly Hills who said, I just shouldn't have it once a week. I gave him his 2 boxes, okay? And I said, well, I can't help you. Here's the number, call. But in fact, they are expanding delivery again. And the people that I met needed it. Now, we had just one anecdote. We had one new guy who gave us a wrong address, and so I'm trying to find him. And he's out on his, finally we find him because he's out on his front porch waiting.
It does say in their letter, they distributed more than 243,000 meals to residents, and it covers 1,963 individuals who could not be certain where they would get their next meal. Since before the COVID-19, the overall percentage of food insecure Powhatan resident was 6.1%, and of children was 6.7%. So that's in their cover letters.
What was that? You just said, I'm sorry, Sean.
It says before COVID, the overall percentage of food insecure Powhatan residents was 6.1%. I guess that's it says, and of children was 6.7. So I'm assuming they're separating adults from children.
Of how much?
6.7%.
What was the grand total they were serving in the region?
1,963 individuals.
10% would be 160, so we're roughly 80 adults, 80 kids. Ballpark.
I think it was before, because they did 7% of the residents and 7.9% of children in Powhatan that was the impact of COVID. That I guess they were just trying to say how normally we're at the 6% during COVID, it went up, had more people without meals. But the story, I guess, is that they did distribute 243,000 meals to Powhatan residents, according to their letter.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Carmack, I don't know whether $8,000 is the right number or wrong number. I only can tell you, I met a lot of hungry people.
Well, what do you guys want to do? I mean, we had in FY '22, we spent $201,000. 229,000 has been requested this year, and the staff is recommending 223. What do y'all want to do?
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I would remove the 5,000 for the Central Virginia Legal Aid.
Okay. Anyone else?
We have to decide about senior connection stuff.
Yeah, I guess it's now's a good time as any, or should we wait and decide on that once we get through some of the presentations in the next couple of months that Mr. Williams has arranged. Right now, we've got in the budget for 5,000, unless we pull it out today. Whether we write the check or not is up to us in your direction later.
I'm fine leaving the 5,000 in. I think as right now it's sort of a placeholder. I know they have been more conscientious in trying to seemingly, serve the citizens. And we can do something similar to what we did, I think this past year, where if it's not happening, write the check.
Yeah. Lonesome Dove is a veterans program.
Yeah, it's for therapy through horseback riding.
we are increasing the Prater Criminal Justice Academy by $3,500.
So
That's
the
based on
request.
a formula that they send.
I think Mr. Cox has spoken well of this in the past.
This is where we all, well. Where's left? Penny's over there. Penny, where's Penny? No. I mean, that's where all of our deputies go for their training.
Okay, that's where I get it.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, I was trying to find the letter. Not making this very long. Oh. Powhatan insurance.
We're gonna take out the Central Virginia aid,
The legal aid, yes.
yeah, legal aid, Central Virginia legal aid.
So that's the only change in the recommended?
We need to cut him more, is that?
We recommended, yeah, we're, as far as staff is, we're good with that.
So we've made one change in what you've recommended.
Right.
Mr. Chair, if you're ready to transition, I would, not much as far as, this topic to the operating budget.
Let's go.
We had one leftover discussion from the last time where Ms. Koenig asked about fire station number 2. If you remember, we were subbing in our rescue services, the 3 positions we were privately contracted out from ESS to provide service. That station, we recommended 3 full-time fire professionals, and that instead, with a revenue neutral, the saving from the private side would be offset the new salaries of the individuals we would hire. And that's the way the budget was presented to you. And then question came up with Ms. Carmack last meeting about call volume at Station 2, and you received a PowerPoint probably in the packet today for email, I'm sorry. The PowerPoint presentation, which was the original response. And then we followed up a little bit more with Chief Warner and Mr. Nolan about actual call volume. But as it always would, when you talk about these stations and how they work together, it's not as simple as just looking at the numbers. So the chart you've got here is an update to what we sent you earlier in the PowerPoint. And Chief Warner's here to kind of give you a better understanding of really what these numbers mean and how these stations work together on the call volume.
So I can answer any questions if you have anything that's direct. And if you didn't get to see the PowerPoint or the kind of the summary overall of what we're doing, is this was not even on the radar when we started, when this year came up. In November, our contract EMS provider, because during the day and night, 24 hours a day, we're covered with a combination of so because we're so unique out here, we have contract EMS personnel, we have volunteers, and we have career staff that's paid by, that works for us as firefighters. In November, our contract EMS provider brought to us that they're going to up our rates by essentially 20%, 19.8%. And this was not anything based off of call volume. It's strictly a financial decision that we think is the best for our citizens across the board. When they came across to us and said, we have a 20% rate hike, we started to experience that rate hike starting January 1, but at $32 an hour versus roughly $27 an hour. And in FY23 in July, it's jumping up to $35 an hour, what we pay ESS for our contract personnel. We're going to still keep that partnership with them, but we're going to slowly over the course of time, we'll see that partnership fade if their rates continue to rise. But this particular removing the one person from Huguenot was not a call volume issue. It was strictly a financial issue that helps us in the long run, especially on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, when our staffing is at a minimum and we have one person take off, we have to fill that slot with either a part-time person or an overtime person. So it gives us a little more robust staffing on the weekend, where we're not spending quite as much money on overtime or on our part-time budget. It's really just across the board. It makes us, to me, it's a financial decision that we had no plan to do this year. It's strictly a financial decision. We can go through the staffing of the way we are now. I had that presentation that I sent to y'all. If there's any questions you have, I'm here to answer.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Conner.
When it says M721 number of calls, all priorities, what does all priorities mean?
So we prioritize calls when somebody calls. It can be from, my foot hurts to I'm having a heart attack. And then they fall on a priority.
Okay.
So priority one is all the stuff that's really life threatening on board: structure fires, car wrecks with injuries, heart attacks, strokes, down to a priority 3 that might be like my foot hurts.
Right.
And I need transport to the hospital. But they all go on calls. They all get the same, they might not get the same sense of urgency, but they all become calls and they all typically become transports.
That's exactly what I was gonna go. What percentage of calls actually result? I mean, you could have somebody calling you and saying, my cat's in a tree or whatever.
Correct. But the graph with the blue lines on it that you have, that is strictly our medic unit that runs out of that station. That represents the ambulance that runs out of there. And that's where the bulk of our staffing is. And so probably 97% of those calls are transports to the hospital. So you look at it anywhere within the county, transported to Westchester, Chippenham, Johnsonville, St. Francis. So it's a length of time that goes involved in that. So typically, anytime we have a call on a transport unit, you're looking at an 1.5 to 2 hour turnaround time. When the call starts, we get there, we process the patient, decide where they need to go, or we're told where we go, transport, and then return back into the county for service.
And right now, you're contracting with a company that took the hourly rate from 27 to 32, correct?
Correct, in January.
In
And then
January.
in July, it starts with 35.
Now, what are our guys, the proposed 3 employees? What would the hourly rate roughly be?
I don't know the hourly rate. We just looked at the total numbers because our firefighters, they work in a range from a new firefighter to a lieutenant who operate these apparatus. Their range, but it's going to be significantly less. When I say that, an hourly rate, but overall with benefits, we'll come back to, I think we budget $180,000 currently for ESS at Huguenot only. We typically at that, or we're going to exceed it this year to like 196. And we're going to be right at 210,000 to add 3 people.
And is there any way you could, like, the one company you look at, is there different companies you can look to contract
We
with?
can, and absolutely, it's absolutely a fair question. Some of my fire chiefs around the region who have polled, the labor rates between $60 and $120 an hour. We by far, with our partnership with the ESS, I'm very thrilled with. This is not anything about ESS. It's a financial decision that we're making in our office that I think is best for the citizens, because that's what you tasked me with, is to be a good be financially responsible. And to me, this is our best decision. And in the future, we just want to continue growth at a very slow rate. And this was an unanticipated growth. And so we have a great partnership. The ESS is well aware of what we're asking for. I meet with them every month. They're in agreement that this is probably the best decision for Powhatan.
It's almost a friendly divorce, because it sounds like they need to help relieve.
Sure, because they also serve 5 other localities, and they have problems with staffing as well.
Right.
So when they send staffing out here, sometimes they're paying overtime, so that's why.
And they're at a contractual rate, they're losing money.
So they end up losing money again. So they'll still be staffing our main rescue squad, at least the weekends and nighttime, daytimes during the week.
Right.
So we still have a great relationship, and we're going to continue that. And there's going to be a day when it fades away, but when that is, I hope it's later than sooner because we have such a good relationship.
And the one thing, and then I'll wrap up on this, not to kind of beat the dead horse. It concerns me with this department, I'll be, to be candid. It's one of those ones, it's a little bit of very nebulous for myself speaking. And the thing that concerns me is this is one of those departments, it's kind of like the schools. Before you know it, you're creeping up money wise.
And I agree.
I just want to make sure that when we bring these 3 guys on, it's not every year we need 3 more, every year we need 3 more. And I would like to see, and Brett, I emailed you today, so if we could get some sort of a kind of a build out analysis so we can plan going into the future, how many households we're adding per year, with these subdivisions, and if we could look back historically at when we started adding people, when's the next population growth where we find that we're having to add more fire and rescue. And
Right. And I agree. And that's one of the things that we're trying to look at ourselves, because we talked about the future fire station in the county. It's going to come. Is it going to come during your tenure? Probably not in the next 2 years, but it's somewhere in that next 10 or 15 years, we can see that. And we're already starting to look at where those locations are, working with GIS and where our call density is. And so we can help make good decisions about this. And one of the things I'm really happy with now is that I think one of our measures is that are we staffed right? And right now, I feel like we're staffed right. I'm thinking in 18 months, 2 years, we're going to have a different conversation. But the gauge I'm using right now is that when we call for help from our neighbors, Cumberland, Amelia, Chesterfield, Goochland, and say we need a transport unit to assist us because we don't have enough because ours are all busy. Last year, I don't think it was less than 5 times we had help, which is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. And this is just transport units because that's where 70% of our business is. And this year we've had it once, and that was on 288 because Goochland was closer than any of our units. So I think we're at a good level of where we're at. We just want to make good financial decisions as we go. That's what you asked me to do. That's what I'm trying to help do. I'm not here to continue growth, but we're gonna see it. I want to control it just as much as you do. But if we do build fire stations, firefighters are going to come in groups. Because when we build a fire station, it'll be a group of firefighters. And because it's just not like if we build it, the volunteers will come. So we have to prepare ourselves for that when that future comes. But right now, if we stay status quo with the amount of stations, our growth will hopefully meet what we had projected when we did our 10-year plan.
Which is a new shift in 25, 28, and 30.
Correct.
Three new shifts coming up.
So we have some growth built into what we forecasted, and that's what our goal is. And we didn't want to do this now, but I think it's the right thing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, no, thank you.
good question, Chief. Can we find people to hire?
Oh, yes, we can.
Okay, good.
And I want to clarify that is that we really have, when we put out for a firefighter application, we get a lot of applications. When we ask for a specific firefighter that has advanced life-saving skills in certification, our application pool is limited.
Okay.
Because other municipalities pay a fair amount more, and they pay a stipend for an advanced life support EMS skill.
70% of the business is transport.
Yes, sir.
We charge a fee for that?
Yes, sir.
Does it cover it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
$600,000 is what we
Revenue
from our
Okay.
past year in EMS transport fees. So that does cover our contractual ESS bills, so to speak, and we still have just a little bit left over to where we can maybe one day use it to purchase an ambulance, an ambulance in the future as it builds.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
Thank you for your time.
Wait a minute, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Wouldn't miss it. The 600,000, is that an accumulation? I mean, is it every year keep accumulating?
Yeah,
So it's
and
not what we
last
have
year
to
we're
spend.
in the 565, 80 range maybe. And this year, when we got our numbers, I think it was the calendar year was 600,000.
Yeah, I think he's asking, is 600 to build up over multiple years or 600 1 year?
1 year.
Annually.
But it's like, it's been, we had a little dip during COVID year because we were off in transport. You can see our transport numbers kind of level off, but this past year, it's definitely, and it's annually. So between $500,000 and $600,000 of revenue each year.
Okay.
From the EMS. bill.
What do you normally spend that on? What do you spend that on?
Our
What do you-
ESS contractors.
So you're paying ESS out of that.
Yes, sir.
And our third-party biller.
And now you want us to pay the 3 FTEs, right? Or you're
Well,
gonna
we-
pay some of it out of the 600,000,
We had $180,000 that was county funded
right?
for ESS.
Right,
And that it was just earmarked for Huguenot.
Right.
And that's the money we're just gonna roll right over into, essentially into personnel,
okay.
plus a little bit.
The number of volunteers at Company 2, how many?
Wow, close to 100 now.
Is the number going up? Is
Yes,
it-
sir.
Good, good. That's what we want to hear. That's very good. So now Station 5 is being built in Midlothian. I think that's correct. Station 5, am I right? How much mutual aid will you get from them?
We currently
Once
get,
that's
we currently get the mutual
completely
aid from
built.
them now. The benefit that they'll have to us in the future is they'll have a transport unit at that station if we were to need it. And they'll have a ladder truck there that will help us, especially in the eastern end of the county towards the Winterfield area and just into the county up to Flat Rock, so to speak.
Right.
So those two, because they've always provided us aid with a fire engine, but their ladder trucks came from either Bon Air or Clover Hill.
Right, so the ladder truck is new. I remember our conversation from a couple of years ago. We were talking about that and how that will be a plus for Powhatan County as they come in. There's always been a good relationship with Chesterfield
Yeah.
and the mutual aid.
On the fire side, we have an agreement with all our neighbors,
Right.
and it's it's a give and take relationship.
Right. You all work well together. Very well. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Warren. So I guess if we could, talk a little bit about the operating budget, and I guess it always has place to start with is tax rates. If I can get Holly to put up the tax chart that was included in your
That's EF4.
budget package.
You all had one of these in the budget letter that Mr. Smither had for his budget, but I've flown it up here just as a visual aid.
Thank you.
Yes, we start off a little bit, again, kudos to the board last year for kind of looking at our financial plan for on a 10-year basis, and trying to figure out how do we better position ourselves for surprises and do a good job of planning along the way. The chart that we've got on the page shows the history of local governments that we in our region, Chesterfield, Henrico, Gushel, and Hanover. And you can see a consistency in the tax rate that these other localities have had, illustrated by the orange line, the gray line, the orange line being Chesterfield, the gray line in Henrico, blue line being Gushel and Hanover. You can see that the main takeaway, I guess, from this chart is Powhatan. The board stepped up and adopted a 79-cent tax rate last year that A is going to be the lowest in the region, and B, we think will last you for an extended period of time, but at least for the next 10 years. And you can see what happens when a recession. In 2008, when a recession hit, it really impacted local governments. By the time that real estate values got impacted on assessments, was typically 2011, 2012, and you can see how other localities were able to ride that out. And how Powhatan was not in a position at that time to ride that out. You can see our taxes jumped at that point from 76 cents up to 90 cents, or stayed in last year, lowered it again to 79 cents. So I think your wisdom and your 10-year rate is going to pay you dividends and protect you from the surprises that come along a way that we just can't anticipate. With that being said, we've got the package in front of you that you have seen. I guess it is my county administrator's recommendation. We fine-tuned a little bit over time. We have found that VRS did let us surprise us with an update. The day my letter went out, they want an additional $192,000 contribution from us for the 3RS. So I've now added that into the operating budget discussion and modeling. I was able to fine-tune some revenue estimates. Mr. Cox, you noticed the other day that school revenues were $50,000 different than they were the first time you saw it. We did fine-tune the school revenues based on the knowledge we got from them. Our comp board money, we were able to fine-tune that, the estimates for comp board funding. We adjusted the real estate tax growth rate for fiscal year 23 to 5%. We had it 4%, so now we believe that the growth rate for the year we're in right now is going to be a 5% number. And I mentioned school revenue estimates. So we've got some changes in the budget that if I could get to put up the we're still in basically the same general growth pattern with these changes as we talked about in the county administrator's budget. Mr. Bowe is going to share this line with him. We'll go to the graph. So this is similar to what there's been some tweaks along the way, but in general, this is the plan we see for the next 10 years as far as the budget is concerned. So with that in mind, I guess I want to open up to get your feedback here. We got schools issues, you know, we talked with the school board last week. We've got, I don't know if you want to talk about the tax rate, the raises that we're proposing. And now's the time. One thing that we have a little pressure time-wise on today is Charlotte has to report to the state.
Yes.
Our VRS, not VRS, our healthcare strategy. Now we built in $465,000 into this budget to cover 100% of a 19% increase in healthcare costs. And right now we're proposing that the counties will pick up that cost for general government employees. That report has to go into the state by 3 days, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, yes, they
Yes.
changed the deadlines on us, so it's really our renewal, but when we renew, we have to tell them what our rates are gonna be, broken down by employee and employer. And so they changed, they upped the date on us, we just found out recently that it's due by March 25th. Our renewal is due, so we have to share what our rates are gonna be at the renewal date.
What happens if we don't? I mean, what are they gonna do?
Then we don't, then we're not renewing, we're not submitting our renewal letter, then we don't have, I mean, I could ask, but I'm thinking that means we haven't committed to having insurance at all, but I can find that out, but I just following the state guidelines.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Williams.
Charlotte, I'm not tracking. Now, when you say we got to report to the state,
Mhm.
and we're talking about down at the Capitol, right?
Department of Human Resources.
Okay, but anyway, I wanted to make sure it wasn't the state insurance or whatever, but we got to report to the state. And I'm wondering why.
Because
The state insurance.
the state insurance plan, local choice.
Okay.
I probably should clarify that when I say report to the
Yeah,
state.
Well, that's that question.
So that's a curveball we weren't expecting to have to push you on today on the focus. If you're comfortable with that concept, and now we'd love to green light David Rowe to go ahead and file that report with whatever strategy we want to go forward with.
Right now, it's 100%.
It is.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
kind of address some of the broader issues that Mr. Smith has raised. One, we'll go back to something I've been critical of before, and that has to do with timing. And when we held budget meetings, we are way behind because you have to remember we changed the calendar. You have to hit June. Last year we had to hit November. So any discussion we have about tax rating, we want to do something, would not be able to hit June. Okay, we've waited way too late in this process to be able to do that. So I don't like losing options. And because we waited this late, we've lost a June option
Excuse me, what do you mean?
for tax rate.
We can set any tax rate you want for June.
She can't get the bills out.
She can, but whatever rate you tell her to put on bills, we can put on the bill for June. That's
How
not,
late? How late can we do?
we need to have a decision by April 1, so she can print by April 15th. So,
April 15th.
yes, sir. But we're in a position to make that decision.
Okay. As far as the tax rate, I think we're in a particularly interesting period where we have major home inflation as well as general inflation. We've got the uncertainty of what's going on in Europe. Supply chain is busted again. Okay, and it's not going to get fixed, and who knows what's going to happen with COVID. I remember our 2020 budget discussions before you got here, Mr. Smith. We were hoping it would be over by the fall. Or was that wrong? So I think we should find a way to give some money back to our citizens, whether that is in a reduced tax rate, or whether it is in some type of refund. But they're hurting too. Generally speaking, I would like to see this budget have less emphasis on spending. I would like to see the CIP pushed out further. I'd like for us to kind of marshal our resources, expecting that it's going to get much worse. I don't see any reason to believe it's going to get any better. So as a tone, I would like to have the budget, not to the extent that we did it in 2020, but that served the county well. We ended up with a lot of money because things turned out much better for our citizens than what we feared. But generally speaking, I'd like to see us spending less money. I'd like to see the CIP pushed out over a longer period of time so that there's less money going out in the short term. And that we are looking at the future more cautiously than this budget seems to indicate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Ms. Scott.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Carmack.
Last year, we had a lot of discussion, put together this 10-year CIP. We talked quite a bit about the tax rate, played with the various rates, and we had a plan. And the plan was 79 cents, and we sat in this room and we all agreed, we don't want to be one of these localities that's ping-ponging our tax rate up and down. We're going to take the political football off the table. We're going to set the tax rate and we're going to move forward. We're going to have 3% raises year over year for a 10-year period with merit-based, with it being merit-based. 2 years ago, I was one of the ones that I didn't reduce the tax rate as much as we could have because I was projecting, along with several other colleagues, thinking doom and gloom was going to happen, the recession was going to happen, and it didn't. I think to take this view that this is going to happen, I mean, we're not fortune tellers. We had a plan, let's stick to the plan. That's where I'm at. We have a CIP. I mean, I'm not opposed to shuffling projects and looking at projects, but to predict that we don't know when there's going to be a recession. We did this 2 years ago and it didn't work out so well, thinking that we were going to have a recession. We had a plan last year, 79 cents. We have compression issues that we have to deal with. Hiring right now is near a possibility. The reality is we're going to have to pay more to get decent people, from the sheriff's department to the fire department to the planning department. It's to lower our tax rate to shoot ourselves in the foot when we, like I said, and I keep going back to it, we had a plan last year. This was exactly what we talked about, that we want to stay with this so we're not all over the board. So I will be, I'm going to support the 79-cent tax rate that we discussed last year and voted on last year.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Plum.
I wasn't part of that meeting, but I do remember, I think everyone at this table agreed that they was going to keep it at the 79%, the 79-cent rate. So I do like the steadiness. We don't know what the future holds, but at least here we know what we have in the future for now. So I think I would stick with the 79 cent also. Maybe look at it again next year if things are better.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
We'll give Mr. Williams an opportunity first.
Listen to the comments. There's a lot of truth in what everybody said. Last year, we did lower it to 79 cents, but and we said, you know, we'd like to get to a point, you know, where we didn't change it every year. And I think I used the example of Goochland. And what wasn't said last year was that we were going to have inflation at 40%. I mean, inflation at a 40-year high. We didn't say that because we didn't know. The other thing we didn't say last year was gas prices were going to be over $4 a gallon. Something we haven't seen since, you know, the OPEC days. You've heard me say this before. We're the workforce for the Richmond region. So us driving to the jobs, you know, where they are in Richmond and Rocco and Chesterfield, it's not cheap. Now, people are paying more today than we ever anticipated last year. So this year, to a very real extent, it's nuanced by the circumstances around us. We have a budget that's over, it's over $109 million net transfers. I believe that's correct. So it makes sense that we could find some modicum of relief, you know, for the taxpayers. And we said, you know, we were looking at 3% raises year over year. And the modeling we're doing seems to be running into trouble because now we're poised to do back-to-back 5% raises. Albeit we get some money from the state, I get that. But nobody anticipated that either. So I'm in favor of, you know, a lesser rate this year. And going back to what we discussed last year, I never said that 79 cents was going to be the number. That was going to be the bottom. In fact, I told colleagues and other people, you know, this is where we're going. That doesn't mean we're going to stop there. So I'm going to be looking for ways where we can give back something. And just think about it. It's just a couple of $100, $300, or whatever it is, relief. That's going to go a long way to trying to offset some of these gas pump bills that, you know, people are getting. Or, you know, the increases they're seeing, you know, when they go to the grocery store. This will help. And I want to do something for everybody, not just, you know, for the county, not just for the schools, but I'd like to do something, you know, for the people that we work for as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Williams. Mr. Cox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to affirm what Mrs. Carmack said. I'm part of the one that said, yep, let's set this rate and let's keep it there. And she's correct. That's exactly what I did. I'm just looking at the world today and I see a world that's changed so dramatically that I'm no longer willing to keep my head stuck on one number. I think if we look at the model changing, it's a 5% schools. That we need to constantly be reassessing the decisions that we made in the past, and that's what I do. Mrs. is absolutely correct about that position, and I was part of it last year. I just want to make sure everybody understood that she was correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make another comment on that.
Sure, absolutely.
We haven't really gotten into the schools budget, that transfer. Now, what that final transfer looks like, I don't know, but I'm going to be going through the schools and the county administrator's proposed budget. I'm going to be looking for ways to be able to get back something, to the taxpayer. And I'm sure it's not going to be that hard. And one of the things that I'm, in particular, and I've been saying this over the last year, these programs that we have that are over and above what everybody else has, and I'm going at the supplemental health care plan for, teachers, that have retired. I can't fund that. Now, just like with the supplemental retirement program, I'm willing to pay for the people that are already in the program, but now to be keeping adding people in today's world where we just said 19% increase in healthcare, we shouldn't be doing that. Now, we should be looking at using that money again to provide some type of relief for the people we work for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. My recollection of things that have happened in the past. People up here have said things today, in the past few minutes, that a lot of it is what really happened. I'm not I try not to be a doom and gloom person. I try to be a realist in terms of what's happening. But I'm not a fortune teller by any means. I don't have a crystal ball. But I've always looked back at how I do my budget, my household. I sit down at the table and figure it out. I know how much money I have, and then I figure out what I can buy or what I can spend. I think that's what we're trying to do, or we want to do. I don't think we did that the past 2 years. I didn't vote for the budget last year, and I didn't vote for the budget the year before. I do have a concern Mr. Cox brings up that I want to make sure I'm clear on this. The timing for us, if we want to change the rate, we want to raise it, lower it, leave it the same. What's the timing? And Ms. Nunley's here. Is that who we should be asking that question to? Or I should be, I guess. What's the timing? When can we drop dead? Got to have a decision made for you to be able to serve the citizens the way you need to serve the citizens in the county.
To get the tax bills out in a timely manner, I need it. With given the new software program, we've never run bills on that before. That has not nothing on that product has been smooth so far. So we're given at least 2 weeks to get through that, and then my printer needs at least 2 weeks, and I need to have the bills out 30 days before the due date.
And what date is that? April 1st. Okay, so we have time.
I can change the tax rate on the bills up to the last minute.
Until March 31st.
Yes.
I got it. Well, I certainly appreciate all your help with the new system that's going in, and I know that's a challenge in itself. The things that, when I look at this, and my recollection is, we agreed we would keep the tax rate, very level. When I look at everybody else that's been successful in the area, they stay very level and consistent. I think if we can become a stable county in saying, you know, whatever the tax rate is, that's what it is, it makes it easier for everybody. It does remove that political football, so to speak, out of it, to where, you know, if you have motivation to lower it for different reasons, you can do that. My perspective is I'm completely fine with leaving the tax rate right where it is. I don't have any intentions of voting to lower it or raise it, either one. I think that if Henrico County has come out with this, you know, refund to the citizens. If you do that, I don't know how many parcels or how you structure that and how many people are involved, but you know, if you got 10, 11,000 people, you're giving back $200 or $300, $2 or $45. You know, everything counts. Taxpayers appreciate that. I would agree with that. But to me, the economy is going to go up and the economy is going to go down. We don't control that. We do control the tax rate in this county. That's the one thing we do control. The budget that we went through last year, I kudos to Mr. Smith. I think he did a great job. We have a CIP. We can go back, and if times get tight like they were in 2020, we can change our CIP. We can move. We don't have to buy this and that and everything that's in that CIP, which is going to be $12 million this year. Pay as you go, I believe is the number. Does that sound right?
$6.5 million.
$6 million
this year.
The pay as you go with that number, we can adjust that if we run into a difficult circumstance, as opposed to trying to predict what's going to happen and telling, you know, everybody that, you know, the world's going to stop turning. We're going to all file bankruptcy and get mortgages foreclosed on and find somewhere we got to live. I'm not a believer in that. I don't think that's the right way. And I'll tell you the same thing I said in 2000 when we were doing the first budget, 2020. I lived in this county and I asked Ms. Barton at that time, what was the worst tax rate, collection rate? Because that's what we were hung up on, is the collection rate, not the tax rate so much. What was the worst collection ever? And it was 94% of our money was collected. And that was in 2008 or 9, she said. I think it was 9. We normally collect 97%. We went down to a budget that was based upon collecting 92% because the world was going to stop turning. You know, the gross domestic product was going to be dismal for years to come. I don't know what the economy is going to do, but I know at 79 cents in the CIP that we have, it's been structured out over 10 years. If we have a problem financially, we're going to be okay in this county. We're going to be fine. We don't have to buy certain things in our CIP. We can leave them alone and keep our tax rate the same. It's a, Mr. Williams brought up, you know, we don't, the school budget, we don't know, you know, how we're going to work that. But I know this, if we have XYZ tax rate, and this is what our income is, now we know what we can spend. And that's how we go forward. I want to know how much money I have in order to know what I'm going to spend. If I know what I'm going to have, then I know how I'm going to distribute it to different groups, departments, or whatever. And when times get rough, it doesn't matter. Everybody's going to have a little bit of pain. It doesn't change for anybody. Everybody will have a little bit of pain in that. So I'm at the 79 cents rate, and I'll make a motion that we keep the tax rate at 79 cents for this year. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
It's open for discussion and questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
let's go back to the date, April 1. Hello,
Becky?
Becky?
Yes.
Date's April 1, right?
Yes.
So in order to if we wanted to change, now, Mr. Valley's going in a different direction, but I want to go back. In order to change tax rate, we have to advertise it for 2 weeks.
No.
If you're not raising the tax rate and the current tax rate that we have is either the same or lower, you do not have to have a public hearing. You just have to have a resolution to adopt. And I confirmed that with Tom last year.
Go ahead with your.
All in favor of the motion? The motion is to stay at 79 cents for this year. All in favor, say aye.
Do we have
Aye.
do we have a roll call, please?
Sure, we can do that. Can we have a roll call vote on that, Mr. Smith?
Mr. Williams,
No.
Mr. McClung,
Yes, aye.
Mr. Cox,
No.
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
Mr. Byron.
Aye. Okay. Know what the tax rate is, Ms. Dunlap? What's next on there, Mr. Smith?
General budget discussion. General budget discussion, we've, yeah, we've touched on the moving parts. We need to have a little discussion on our VRS, excuse me, our healthcare rate. Do we have to let the state know about? That 465,000 is embedded into the budget that's in front of you. So if we wanted to give the green light for us to stay in the states, what's the name? I'm sorry, name of the state.
Local choice.
Local choice. Sounds like they squeezed us on the notice take. We got to talk how to make a decision today on that.
Okay. Any thoughts, questions? Anyone want to make a motion on that? The $465,000 that's included in the proposed budget by the county administrator for healthcare costs. I'll make the motion that we leave that at the, or we acknowledge that we're at 465,000. We're going to include that in the budget. We can contact local choice and tell them that we're going to pay that.
I'm
Is there a second?
I'll
confused.
second the.
I'm just
Okay.
confused.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The 465,000 is in the budget?
It is.
Is it already in?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It's in the proposed budget.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's,
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
it's not an addition.
Nope.
Yes, sir.
Nope.
Sorry, Mr. Byron.
Nope. Nope. Should I have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay. Want to do a roll call? Go ahead.
Mr. Williams. Mr. McClung.
Aye.
Mr. Cox.
Aye.
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
Mr. Byron.
Aye.
That's all the question, but that was our presentation.
Good. I've got a question I want to ask you about going off the bat. We have a proposed 5% pay raise that the schools have put out. Do we have to do that?
We do not have to do that. We can prorate, our understanding is we can prorate down the Board of Education's funding for the schools.
Last year, you had to do a minimum of 2% in order to get a proration as far as the revenue share. Their portion.
The comp board we're unsure of as far as if we pull back from 5, we're having a hard time getting confirmation that they will prorate down to 3. So but the numbers we showed the other day, if you noticed, when we went from 5% to 3, we pulled the comp board funding out because we didn't know what their position would be.
Mr. Chairman. So that the comp board with the schools is SOQ.
Yes,
Employees,
yes.
right? Yes, sir.
Different.
Ms. Williams. I got it.
The answer you just gave, or responded to Mr. Biley's question, because I was going to ask the same question. Can we draw down monies from the state for the 5% if we do a lesser percent raise?
Yes, sir, it's proportional down to 2%. That was as.
We can do that this come.
Yes, sir.
So when you say proportional, translate that.
Oh, yes, sir. So if for, this is for last year, so I would have to confirm if it's the same case this year. But if we did a 2% raise, it would be 2/5 or 40% of what they were going to match if we did the maximum contribution.
Let me ask a follow-up question if I may.
Yes, sir.
Composite index helps determine what is our share
Yes.
to pull down. Our composite index went up this year, correct? So we're gonna have to put up more money than we did last time.
Yes, sir.
And again, what I'd like to see is the numbers, you know, if we do the 3% or if we do the 5%, you know, going back to the previous conversation, what is it we have to put up to draw whatever amounts down from the
I
state?
think we've done.
And then,
for you.
I think you
We
did.
have that. It was a part of a request that Ms. Carmack had.
Yeah.
That we included. We don't have a paper copy of it. We have on the screen there. The education revenue is the second to last line there. It's at 3%, we're looking at $419,000 in revenue for salaries. And at 5% is close to $700,000. So that's the difference there is that.
You sent that to us?
You
Yes, sir.
should have it in your binder, I believe.
It was emailed.
No, we brought it to the meeting.
Oh, yes, yes.
We brought it to the joint meeting, but if not, we can get you a copy of that.
Please.
Sure.
Notice the comp board funding up there is still, we're unable to determine right now how they would react, if they would react like the Board of Education if we did not do the 5%. That's down to, we gotta get that answer. I made a phone call today to try to clean that up, and I still haven't got an answer on that.
What do you mean by act the way the Board of Education
The
acts?
Board of Education basically took the $698,000 at 5% and said 419 prorated down.
Okay,
But right now, you see my comp board money is at 181 for 5%, and I can't confirm you go get anything if we don't get the 5%.
okay.
Sheriff, if you've got any comments on that, if you know anything about that.
No, they haven't approved, current governor's budget
Yes.
yet. And until they do, we won't get the rules on the comp board. And as y'all was saying earlier, they change year to year. Sometimes they have a requirement that all of it goes to the comp board employee. Sometimes they allow a split. In years past, that's the way it's, in years past, comp, or if you supplement, you got to use it how you saw fit. They stopped doing that about 8 years ago, 8, 9 years ago, they started doing it just now. And I've asked the Sheriff's Association also, they haven't got a straight answer either.
We also provided some information on other localities in your packets too, if you want. Everybody's wrestling with the same topic.
Thank you.
Something Rico was giving back money to directly.
They give it, they're actually doing a rebate, right, yeah, taxes. But this is just.
It's just a rate cut. There once in a lifetime last year.
They called it generation.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Conrad.
are we, if we're about wrapping up, I would like to add one more thing for you all to consider before. Kind of budget driven. One thing I would like to propose, we've talked about, I mean, this is budget related inadvertently. We've had some discussion about the transportation, the CPTA money. I would like to, we've discussed kind of moving along on some of these projects, and I would like to propose the following transportation improvements to possibly get moving on quickly, being that we have the money. One of them is the Holly Hills turn lane. I know Mr. McClung, that was a big issue for his district.
Yep.
The second one would be the Route 13, Route 60 Academy Road improvement. The third one, the turn lane at Trenholm Road, and finally, some of those miscellaneous minor modifications on 7-Eleven. I believe with the given monies that we have, we can afford all of these. They would benefit each of our districts. Most of these projects would not likely be developer funded. And, you know, we can do a lot of analysis, but at the end of the day, they're all recommendations. A couple of them have been in our smart scale. So I think at this point, it would be beneficial to put a stake in the ground and let's get moving on some of these. We have the money, it's sitting in the bank. Let's get working.
Probably like you said, Holly Hills, the second one, I think, Academy Road.
Academy Road.
Route 60
60.
Academy Road, turn lane at Trenholm Road, and then some of the minor VDOT recommendations for the improvements on 7-Eleven.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Williams.
the discussion we had with Brett, it was last meeting, you know, where you presented, you know, the CVTA monies and, you know, small scale projects. I think you were tasked with, as we talked about yesterday, going back and looking at how these projects could be staged, you know. We said, you know, it's going to take at least a year and a half to find out about small scale applications. The application dates in March. We won't get the final go ahead until I think you came up, the staff came up with the year and a half time. So when you look at, you know, your spreadsheet, you've got in between, you got a year and a half there, so that's another $2 million that we're taking in from CVTA. Then you've got, if the application does get funded, you go out and you're looking at 5 years before money comes in to do the project. Good thing is we know it's going to be fully funded. So the question has been, you know, since the last meeting, what is it that we do with the monies that we're getting each year they're building, and how do we at the same time leverage these monies with smart scale and the regional surface transportation block grants that come through the TPO? That's your federal dollars. So do we want to look at leveraging the RSTP projects, you know, which we submit every October? Do we want to look at using any of this money for leveraging any smart scale projects, and then doing the triage of what projects do we want to fund in between? And that's what I'm looking for, having that on a piece of paper, a spreadsheet, showing how we can do that. That understands.
We need to have that, we really need to.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cox, Mr. McClung.
No, anybody else want to have a conversation?
I didn't say a word.
Okay.
Yes.
The smart scale project is pushed out 5 years. We're going to be getting $2 million a year roughly from the CVTA or year over year. Even if we decide to leverage the monies that we have for smart scale, we will have it in the bank. We talked about that. I mean, so it's not like we're going to be getting money year over year. So 4 years down the road, if they finally decide to fund something, or when it happens, we will have the money. So I don't understand. Help me understand why we can't act now.
Oh, I was referring to the projects we definitely can act now on, but we have to schedule out money to be available with the certain projects that go ahead with smart scale 5 years out.
5 years
We have
out.
to have a plan that's going to fund that. That doesn't mean we're not writing checks along the way, you know, for funding projects that we can afford away from smart scale.
Right. So like I said, I mean, we talk and we talk about how we want to do these improvements, and we're a year now, and we're nowhere further down the road of doing any kind of road improvement in this county. Let's put a stake in the ground. Vote. I don't care what project it is, but let's vote on something. We have the money sitting there. Let's move.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Williams.
I don't disagree with Ms. Carmack. I mean, I think, you know, we should, you know, do transportation projects. All I'm asking for is to get what she has just articulated down on a spreadsheet and have it in front of us so that we can make good decisions with our eyes wide open and all of us agreeing at the same time, this is the way we want to proceed, along with the other projects. Now, I'm not sure, for example, that, you know, and I know she's not tied to these 3 projects. But again, I would like to see this down on paper and how it goes out over time, you know, with these 2 million, and she's exactly right. It comes in every year, it accumulates. And then how does it get decremented when we say we want to leverage a project? And when do we have to come up with that money for leveraging the project? That was the other question that came up in the last meeting. And we haven't seen anything back yet that addresses that. So that's all I'm asking for is let's get it down on paper. Let's agree how we want to proceed and then initiate. I have any problem with that.
So we could, if this works, we have the model we've been working on, we can plug in projects either partially smart scale funded, fully funded local funds. So we can put these projects in as funding locally and show you what that does, and we can pay for them. One other thing, since we met, talking with VDOT about smart scale projects, since we've been in the past having no match for smart scale, asking for all state funding, it's been wait 5 years for the funding to fully get there, then start. But one thing that now we know, if we're putting in a match, these projects essentially have 3 phases. The engineering design of the project, then the right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, and then the construction. If we can fund any one of those first 2 phases with our local match, we can start it earlier. So let's say we put in enough match to do engineering and right-of-way acquisition on the project. We don't have to wait 5 years. We can get that going 2 years, 3 years, just so long as once that's finishing, the times with the construction.
But we would make that,
So-
excuse me, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
so next, we would make that as part of the application.
Right, but
We would tell them this is what we're doing. And then if we got approved for the project, we can continue forward with doing what we told them we were going to do. You know, using our money that we were going to use for the match. And then if we didn't get it, we're still that much further along with the project.
yeah, so we had, Mr. Smith and I worked on a model that we could put in when we want projects to happen and get built and see if you agree with that. So April, that would refer to you, we have to publish the packet tomorrow for the merge meetings that probably hard to get it together for that, but we can send you something in advance to look at it. Yeah, we can do a mix of funding projects now to get things going, actually use some of that money so the public sees the benefit while using some of the leverage, you know, take our dollar, turn it into 5 or 6.
Do we need to have a public hearing on any of that? I mean, that's funds we've got in.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, we're just making a decision on where we're gonna go once we receive the information that Mr. Williams is requesting, right?
Brett, I need your help. Does smart scale require any kind of public board action or?
Yeah, we don't need, so the pre-applications are due April 1, so working on that now. We don't need board action for that. At our workshop on February 22nd, you gave me enough direction to apply for 5 projects. Prior to August 1, we finally apply for our top 4. We will need a resolution from you saying these are our 4 projects, but that's not in August, and that's just for the.
So that's not a public hearing.
Right, yeah, we don't, so the answer would be no, we don't need that.
Hearings not required. When the project goes to being awarded, public meetings are required, but those are not like open house style.
In this information that Mr. Williams is looking for, to give us a little bit of an analysis of how we can plan this out and know we have the funds available. We know we're gonna get $2 million a year. We know we have $6 million in the bank now. And smart scales 5 years before you see any of that money, right? So come April the 1st at our budget hearing, can you guys bring that to that workshop? It's April the 1st. Can you bring that information at that time?
Try our best. I've got to get all our smart scale applications in by April 1, and that's a ton of work. But yeah,
Yeah, possibly we could have a little bit more time Chairman Barley, I'm trying to think of the last meeting in April is what day, fourth Monday?
25th.
The 25th, could we have as part of the work, part of that board meeting? It's not really a work.
I'm fine with April 25th. If everybody here, Mr. Williams, Ms. Carmack, you guys good with that?
I just want something to happen. We,
Mr.
you know,
Cox?
it's time.
Mr. McClung? So, yeah, then let's just use April 25th. We bring that forward and we'll be ready to go and make a decision.
Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Cox.
Brett, help me understand, isn't the rub making a match now on smart scale? Okay, so that money has to get set aside, okay, for some future spending date, okay? And so that really determines how much we could spend now. Okay, so that,
Yeah.
okay, so I just want to make sure I understand that.
Yeah, you're committing that money.
Yeah.
You're sending it to the
We're
side.
committing that. So the more smart scale projects we put in with matches, the more money we've committed for some point in the future, which has some impact on what we can spend today.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, Mr. Williams.
Mr. Cox, the question was, if it's committed, is it obligated or is it committed? We're obligating the money, but when do we actually have to come forward with the money? If we do get the award and then it's 5 years up. So that was the question.
Yeah, so that's due whenever the, so let's say we didn't start a project early, originally 20% forward. In that case, it would be due when there's construction in year 5, 6, 7, whatever. If on the other hand, we wanted to put in enough to start the engineering on the project, it would be due when engineering starts, which could be earlier.
That's, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
That comes into making the decisions about how we want to stage these projects, because if we're leveraging and saying, okay, we're going to go ahead and do the preliminary engineering on this project, and that is going to be our match, for the project application, then we are committing to that project. If we get the smart scale, fine. We don't, we're still going forward.
No, sorry. So in that case, we would only go forward with the engineering if it gets awarded.
But what I'm saying is, we need to have that understanding that do we want to go forward and have that option? That's all.
Yeah, so in April, we can present a draft of the model to you, which show here's projects, here's when they'll happen, based on just locally funded bridge can do this project. This one we're gonna try for smart scale, and what happens, and what happen on this year. So we'll plot that all out for you. You can see.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak to the board? Not seeing anyone come forward. Zoom?
Take Zoom, and we are. Chairman, I have technical difficulties. Thank you.
No, no one. We're clear?
Oh, hold on, Max Timberlake just raised his hand.
Okay. Mr. Timberlake, you there? Mr. Timberlake, unmute.
Since I learned how to do the unmute button.
There you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Max Timberlake, 1479 Dorset Road, Powhatan. I'm representing the board of directors for the Powhatan Farm Bureau Federation. I hope you had a chance to read the article in Powhatan today about the National Agricultural Week, which is this week. Agriculture and forestry is a primary contributor to the rural character that we all love about Powhatan. As stated in the article, agriculture and forestry contribute $91 billion to Virginia's economy annually. We are in the process of gathering updated data specifically for Powhatan County. I'm here to request your continued support for the Cooperative Extension Service and the Monacan Soil and Water. Monacan Soil and Water has provided our farmers and landowners a long history, cost-efficient best management practices, including cost sharing, education, and technical assistance. The Extension Service is our source of subject matter experts ranging from homeowner gardening to full-scale production agriculture. They support the very large volunteer programs such as 4-H clubs and FFA chapters. As you're aware, the largest part of funding for these organizations comes from the state government. But without local county funding, these programs will be lost. Our Farm Bureau Board has gone on record to officially endorse the very essential work of both of these services. I thank you for your time and your service to our citizens, because I am just a farmer, plain and simple.
Thank you, Mr. Timberlake.
Thank you.
Anyone else on Zoom?
Zoom is clear.
County Administrator comments,
No comment, Mr. Chair.
board comments. Not hearing any.